Welcome to Perspectives El Paso. You're expecting to see Professor Leon Blevins of the Government Department at El Paso Community College, but instead you see James Madison, that helped write the U.S. Constitution and basically wrote the Bill of Rights, which consists of the first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution. I have here today a special guest. He's been on this show before, David Marcus, very active in the Jewish community, a community leader, bringing in guest speakers over the years for us to hear and to learn from. And he was contacting us recently about coming back on again, and sometimes I do have people on more than once, and he wants to talk about the Bill of Rights. Wow, and especially the First Amendment and the sections about, I believe, religious rights. No establishment of religion, and we have the right of free exercise of religion. David, welcome back to the program again.
Thank you, Professor. Good to see you.
When you're on, it's an interesting show.
I understand.
Now, what do you want to say about the Bill of Rights? Why do you want to talk about the Bill of Rights?
I think, the Bill of Rights, and specifically the First Amendment. I think what worries me the most, and the reason we formed an organization to teach people about it, is so few people actually sit down and read what it says. And I think if people would read it, they would have a much deeper understanding of what their rights are under the Constitution. We're talking about their rights, not the government rights. Right. And what protections are in place for them. And yet so few people understand what those really are, and they listen to other people who have other agendas, and before you know it, they start fighting against these or try to breach these in some way or manner. I mean, separation of church and state in the First Amendment, freedom of religion. It's there to protect their right to practice their faith. It's not there to avoid religion at all costs. It's not there to be anti-religion. It's there to protect everybody's religion. And it's there to protect those that don't want to practice a religion as well. They have an equal right to not do that.
Well, our founding fathers wanted to create a secular government.
That's correct.
Without a church-state situation that was tied so closely that they were taking money from people in their religious areas and spending it on the state, supporting other religious groups. So we know that was one of the stimulus behind the writing of this. Now I put together I have an autographed copy for you of this. I did this annotation of the U.S. Constitution, and it got published in 1986. I won't go into all the background of that, but it's not the whole Constitution, but major parts.
Okay.
And in the red letters, you see the concepts that are in the blue writing. This is what is in the Constitution. These are the concepts that are there. Mm-hmm. And one of them down in here, we get into the First Amendment, which starts with religion.
Correct.
Now, when I ask my students at community college, what's the first right mentioned in the Bill of Rights, they'll say what?
Freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech, every time. And no, it's not that, it's religion. Then it goes to speech and assembly and petition and things of that nature. And James Madison met with some of the religious leaders of Virginia, John Leland and some others, and these religious leaders were saying, please put something in this Bill of Rights you're putting together for this new document that would give us the right to have our own religion and practice it as we wish, as long as it is not violating social order and decency and endangering people. So that now it's been interpreted over all the years. Now you kind of hinted at that people have their different views about what our rights should be.
Of course.
Because they read it into the language.
Well, I mean, today, you have religious leaders, some, not all. I mean, I belong to a faith, I think you do too, that believes separation of church and state is important and good. But there are many others who they want to pass laws based on what certain passages in Leviticus say. So they read those passages literally, and they say that should apply to everybody. It's their interpretation of those passages, though. Yours might be totally different. Mine might be different from yours. Whose are we going to use to pass this great law that we want to make? I think people don't understand the concept of what that really means. And if they're saying that this is a Christian nation because more people are Christian in the U.S. than in any other faith, they're probably correct. But should it be a Christian nation with Christian laws that are their interpretation of a specific law? how do you do that? What are you trying to do? It doesn't work.
Well, that's what the radical fundamentalists are doing, the jihadists are doing, trying to force their religion on everybody else. And if you don't believe the way we do, you're dead.
There are so many examples in the world today where we've proven, we can see today in how many places in the world where if you allow faith and religion, your faith and religion or anybody's, to govern how that country works, it doesn't work. It doesn't work well, it doesn't work at all.
Well, the danger of religion is people get the idea that their God is as they believe their God is, and other people have their vision of what God is.
True.
And they have their vision of what the laws should be. Now, under radical Islam, they want Sharia law, the Koran, to be their book of laws.
Yeah.
We do not want the Bible to be our book of laws, either the Old Testament or the New Testament.
We don't.
We don't.
But there are people in this city that do.
Oh, I know.
So, and that's the problem.
And our founding fathers did not want
No,
it.
they wrote this document that you took these annotations out of purely as a secular document. They understood the problems that would happen if they allowed religion to govern our lives.
Now, at the end of this annotation, I did indicate something about it. I believe it's on this one, or it may be in another one. Oh, it's in I did an annotation of the American Declaration of Independence, and then also the Texas Declaration. At the end of the American Declaration of Independence, it refers to providence. Some believe that's God. Mm-hmm. Others just believe it's a divine creator started the world, the deist.
Right.
But they just believe God started the world, created the world, started it, and leaves us up to ourselves. Jesus was not the Savior. Some people get upset with Jefferson because he rewrote the New Testament and took the miracles out of the New Testament. Yeah. And so they don't.
But that was his interpretation of it.
That's exactly right.
And so what if he had decided that should be law?
Yeah.
And you might have a totally different opinion about that.
Yeah. So
it
this
can't work. It doesn't work.
And that's the reason we have so many denominations, because everybody has different opinions about it.
Exactly. Exactly. But yet I had a leading religious leader here in El Paso swear to me that the Constitution of the United States was divinely inspired, written by God through man.
I know.
And that the First Amendment, freedom of religion, was meant to say that we, people of faith, could control government, but government could not control them. Mm-hmm. So, in other words, they thought it was a one-way street, and it's a two-way wall.
When the United States Supreme Court decided the first major prayer decision that you could not have written prescribed prayer for public school students, 1962, I think it was.
63 was the Schempp versus
Engel versus Vitale.
Yes,
was the first one. Then Schempp.
That was New York.
And you had Mr. Schempp here in El Paso.
Yes, we did.
That was a New York case. Here. I was taking some classes at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Fort Worth. And some student stops me in the hall. Did you hear the Supreme Court has said, but you can't have God in the schools anymore? They've taken prayer out of the schools. I said, well, that means God's real small if you take him out of the school. What kind of God you got? And we go to class. We're going to church history class. Mm-hmm. And this came up as discussion. I said, wait. I'll have to research this and find what it was. It was that you could not have the state write a prayer, a mixture of a Jew, a Catholic, and someone else, that they wrote a prayer and then the state adopted it for kids to say at the beginning of the school day. And my question in that class, and I'm sure you've raised this, whose prayer are you going to say?
Exactly.
Do you want to have to put a prayer cloth down and face east and say prayers several times a day? Is that the prayer you want? Or do you want chants with bells and incense? Is that the prayer you want? Well, no. At that Baptist seminary, they wanted Christian prayers. Mm-hmm. I said, okay, but this is not strictly a Christian country. We are a country of people that are permitted to practice all kinds of faith.
That's right. And some no faith at all.
Exactly.
And they have that perfectly, it's a perfect right to them as well. Uh-huh. And we need to protect their right not to pray if they so choose, as much as your right to pray if you so choose. But you can't do that if we mix religion with government. Uh-huh. If we allow that wall of separation to fall, then a number of different faiths will be hurt by it. They will, their belief systems, they will not be able to practice publicly if there are laws that are based on another religion's interpretation of the Bible. Right. You've just got so many dangers inherent in this. And it really is no different than the Sharia law that you can see practiced in the Middle East today. No different at all. The laws are different, but the results are exactly the same.
Now, I had you on previously when I noticed you'd started a group called Join Us for Justice.
Yes.
And that's what we discussed there. And you're affiliated with Americans for Separation of Church and State.
Americans United, Separation of Church and State.
Americans United for Separation of Church and State. Do you want to once again give a telephone number or a website?
The website is www.joinusforjustice.org. It's actually www:joinusforjustice.org.
Okay.
You can you can see upcoming events on there. You can find out what we're doing. You can contact us through there. There are phone numbers on there. There's addresses on there. Emails on there. We try to produce one event approximately every 3 months.
Okay.
Of course, we just got done with our director of religious outreach from Americans United coming to El Paso and speaking here at the community college. So,
well, this is September of 2014,
right?
And I know you have some events coming up right away that we won't be able to get this on air before they happen. But we want them to know there are all kinds of events coming up, like you said, every several months.
Every 3 or 4 months we're trying to do it.
Because you feel so strongly about this, educating the public about the Constitution and about our rights.
And we're not anti-religious at all. Many of the board members of Join Us for Justice are very religious. We have members of many different faiths on our board. We have many members who are atheists on our board. We're not here to stop people from practicing their religion. We're not here to tell them they can't put Santa Claus in their front lawn. I mean, we want them to pray. We want them to practice their faith and their belief any way they want to do it. What we are here for is we're here to protect that right, so that there won't be some other faith they may not subscribe to or believe in, who comes in and passes a law that prevents them from doing something that they believe they should be able to do.
Well, what kind of things are happening that you think are the most dangerous to this issue of separation of church and state?
Oh, obviously there's some very recent decisions that went against separation.
U.S. Supreme Court cases.
2 of them, Greece, New York.
Okay.
That ruling just astounds me today. I don't know how those people came up with it. Where they clearly, there's Greece, New York has Christian prayers before every city council session. They admit they're Christian prayers.
I remember that.
So you have a Jew and an atheist who come before city council to transact business, and they have to sit there and either they have to be prayed to and with a Christian prayer that neither one of them subscribe to. And why? What's the point? Are they going to be able to build better roads because they've prayed according to the Christian Bible?
Well, you see, evangelicals want everybody to be Christian.
Exactly. So they want this to continue in Greece, so that hopefully by doing this they can convert more people to Christianity. Whatever the case is, it's wrong though. It's just wrong. It's not going to help the city function better. It's not going to create more tax dollars for the city. It doesn't make the council and mayor make better decisions. If anything, they're showing their stupidity by doing things that are totally wrong. Another case very recently, a mayor in Florida. The whole council stands up to pray, and there was a gentleman, a resident of the city, in council chambers who sat down, wouldn't stand up. And he wouldn't stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance. He was an atheist. He didn't believe in anything that prayed to God. That's his right. Yeah. There's not a law that says he has to do that. I mean, that we're trying to avoid that happening.
I have a personal case on that. When I started teaching here in 1972, probably about a year after that, 1973, and most of my students were men just coming back from fighting in Vietnam. And I'd done a slideshow. I know it was 73 because I made a trip during the summer of 73. Took a lot of pictures of flags and patriotic things and put together some music, showed it in my classes at community college. The very first class I showed that slide music show. All these guys stand up when it comes to the very end with a great big flag and the patriotic music, except one man. And these veterans looked at him and gave him the stare. And like, what are you doing? They didn't shout at him or anything, but they gave him the stare. The class ended and they all left, and I said to him, he didn't stand up. He was sitting there. He refused to stand up. I said, I think I know why you did this. It's because of your religion. He said, yes, I'm Jehovah's Witness.
There you go.
And I don't believe in saluting anything except God Jehovah. And therefore I have the right. And I said, I know the cases of the Supreme Court years ago in the 1940s concerning children that were Jehovah's Witnesses. At first, the Supreme Court said they had to stand and salute the flag and say the pledge. And then later they reversed themselves very quickly. They said, no, that is a fundamental right for these young children. Their religious belief is more important than them having to do that.
Sure. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, this mayor in Florida had the police remove the man because he wouldn't stand up.
That's going too far.
Well, I mean, that's an act of stupidity. I mean, and unfortunately, we have leaders all around the country who are just as stupid as he is. But all he did is cost this Florida town probably hundreds of thousands of dollars they're going to lose in a lawsuit.
Yeah.
This guy clearly has and is going to win because he got his constitutional rights violated.
Right.
The very rights that you talk about here and that we need to be protecting instead of letting people like that bend them and change them so that fits their agenda and not anyone else's.
Well, my student knew that he could have been attacked by some of these guys after class or anything else over that, but he still believed that he did not have to stand like everybody else did.
Yeah.
He was a nonconformist. In a way, Madison and others that wrote all of this were nonconformist in some sense.
Sure.
They were conformist in one sense of the revolution. It wasn't a total revolution of destroying everything, economics, religion, and so on. But they believed that people had a right to be different. Mm-hmm. That's what some of this is.
Absolutely. Everything in there is. I mean, think about it. The right to free speech. It means you wouldn't need the right to free speech if we all agreed on everything.
Yeah.
I mean, it just doesn't happen that way.
Right.
I think the other issue this year that happened, of course, is Hobby Lobby case. That was just ridiculous.
Okay, tell the audience what Hobby Lobby is.
Well, Hobby Lobby is a corporation. We go in there and buy our craft items. Okay. My wife loves Hobby Lobby, and she has not been back because that's her protest.
Okay.
The owners of Hobby Lobby, the stockholders, because it's a corporation, it's owned by individuals, but it's still a corporation. They decided that they didn't want to supply contraceptive benefits in their health plan. So, took it to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said, fine, you don't have to do that. You can be different. Right. But what they've done is they said that the corporation could exercise its religious belief. In a sense, they have subscribed individual rights to a corporation which never existed before.
Right.
So, and they've actually said that the corporation will take on the belief system of its owners. So what they've done is they've pierced that corporate veil. People today, individual form corporations. What's the first reason an individual would form a corporation if they're already in business?
Yeah.
They're doing it to protect themselves from legal liability.
Right.
Somebody can't sue them individually. They have to sue the corporation, right? But they can't pierce that veil and get to the individual who might be running that thing. But if you're going to allow that corporation to pick up the fundamental religious beliefs of the individual that owns it, it's the same thing. They have pierced that veil. If you own a small corporation, if you're a small business person, and you want to do what Hobby Lobby did and start making your corporation follow your religious practices, and somebody comes along to sue you because you've done something unrelated to that, but nevertheless there's a lawsuit there. Yeah. There would be I think it'd be a great case for a lawyer to go against the individual's personal assets at that point, because that corporation is no longer the separate entity it was designed to be.
Well, for years I taught in my classes, as most people did, that a city is a corporation, or that other organizations, corporations, were artificial persons. And you had 100 years of court decisions along that line.
Sure.
Then along comes a very conservative movement in a case called Citizens United.
Of course.
And the U.S. Supreme Court said that corporations are people, and they should be treated like people.
Right.
And they overturned 100 years of precedent.
They did. And they also created a huge legal morass. It's gonna take years to untangle this. Yeah. And I think ultimately it's not good for Hobby Lobby itself. I think they're the ones that are going to actually find out they They probably bit off more than they can chew on this. I think it's a big mistake. And then you're forgetting about the fundamental violation of individual women who work for Hobby Lobby and their rights to the same thing everyone else is getting. That just doesn't make any sense at all. So we're using religion to say that this corporation, which we're going to make a separate entity for all other purposes, but for this purpose, it's going to be an alter ego of our religious beliefs.
A question to you about your organization, both these organizations, United,
Americans
United, and yours, Join Us for Justice. You lobby? Do you lobby for legislation?
No, we don't lobby.
You're a nonprofit?
We are a nonprofit.
Okay, but then you advocate for certain things without spending money and hiring lobbyists and going and try to shape legislation.
No, we don't really advocate. In fact, if we advocated, we'd probably be classified as lobbyists.
Okay.
And we're not. What we are here for is an educational institution.
Okay, so you go to meetings and other places and it's informational, educational. That's the nature of this program.
That's exactly right. We go, if somebody on city council in El Paso is trying to put a policy or law into effect that would start to breach that separation of church and state, we go speak before council and we tell them why we think that's a mistake.
Okay.
We show them the laws. We bring legal experts in from Washington if we have to.
Okay.
We have that right to, we have the ability to do that since we're now an affiliate of Americans United.
Okay.
We produce programming, such as the one with Reverend Stephen Baines, who's coming to El Paso this next Friday.
Okay.
We try to do that at least every 3 or 4 months. That's what we're doing. We're trying to educate people. In other words, what we're trying to do is we're going out into the public and we're saying, look, we know your pastor tells you that separation of church and state is bad, we're interpreting it wrong. That's not what it means. He's telling you that perhaps you should have the right to make laws based on the Bible. We're trying to teach them that may not be. We're showing them the Constitution. We're showing them the First Amendment. We're talking about why freedom of religion is only going to be as strong a protection if separation of church and state remains as strong as it is.
Well, I can remember when a lot of pastors, evangelical, not Jewish pastors, that they supported separation of church and state. I know the Jews have done that too. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the evangelicals were supporting separation of church and state until something happened. In the 1950s, desegregation of the schools,
right,
and white flight, a lot of white people moving to the suburbs, putting their children in evangelical Christian schools to avoid segregation. And then I began to see that their thinking began to change. They began to see, especially if they wanted some money, because it was going to be high tuition for the private school and they were still paying taxes for the public school.
Right.
So some of my friends began to change their thinking on that and said, oh, by the way, we've changed our view on separation of church and state. And another was the gay movement, the abortion issue. Those three I saw changing things.
They are.
Speak to that.
Well, I think, it's hard to speak to it generally, but let's use examples. Same-sex marriage. There are laws that different states have tried to put in place that prevented same-sex marriages from being legal in that state.
Yeah, they're in court right now.
And every one of them except for one this week, every one of them except for this one this week, has held that that's unconstitutional. You can't prevent a same-sex couple from marrying in your state. It's just, so they're falling. But what you should notice is it's incredible, the momentum is built up, and it's literally like a train rolling downhill. They're knocking down these barriers against same-sex marriage in state after state after state. Right. And except for the one that held the other way this week, I think it's a direct result of the religious right attempting to push religious laws and their agenda on breaking up the separation of church and state. Right. That really has only happened, you've only seen it in the last 36 months. And as a result of that, I believe that's what you're beginning to see this kickback. It's people are fighting back harder than ever now.
Well, it's being called a culture war.
It is. And So you've got more and more states around the country for the first time in decades where same-sex marriage is legal. Loving couples are able to marry, have children, adopt children, whatever a normal married couple can do. A heterosexual couple could do the same rights now subscribe to a same-sex couple.
Well, it used to be that people of different races could not marry.
Exactly.
When I first learned about that and was teaching in classes about that, I was talking about blacks and whites. And in the Loving case in Virginia, eventually the Supreme Court said that was unconstitutional. Mm-hmm. I had a Hispanic fellow back from Vietnam, back in the early 70s. Mm-hmm. And he said, Mr. Blevins, that applied to me. I met a Korean woman fighting in Korea, brought her back to the United States, was stationed in Virginia. We went to get a marriage license and they wouldn't let us do it.
Let them do it.
We had to go out of state, another state, to get married.
That's scary.
I didn't know it had to do with Koreans and Hispanics.
It was pretty much whatever they wanted it to apply to, depending on the state you were in.
Right.
And
some of these came out of religion.
Of course.
The ideas of religion.
Sure. It's sad. That's falling by the wayside. And so if you really look, there are these two Supreme Court cases we talked about that ruled against separation of church and state probably were unusual. I think what we're going to see, though, is more and more of a railroad effect of states who are trying to pass laws against same-sex marriage, against other issues relating to religion and government. I think that's going to start falling more and more and more. You're going to see that happen.
This is interesting. Do you know we have 2 minutes left?
Yes.
Do you realize how fast this 28-minute segment
It's an amazing thing. But you're a fascinating guy. So
Yeah, well, you're fascinating too. And I have more time in class to talk about this than I have on the TV show.
Yeah.
So we're glad that you contacted us about coming back and speaking to this issue.
Oh, Leon, thank you for
and
having me.
we wish you well with your organization.
Thank you for having me.
And we certainly support you on many of these issues.
If I could just announce the website again.
Last minute, website.
www.joinusforjustice.org.
Very good. We're going to
right.
scroll that across there. David Marcos, glad you're here. And I was just teasing you a little bit ago. I'm not really James Madison. I really am Professor Leon Blevins, a very unusual fellow here on the border of Mexico and the United States. Join us again for a future show.